Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. I just wanted to show you the books I read in 2022 and tell you a bit about them in my opinion. Let's just get started. The first book that I read this year was If We Were Villains by ML Rio, and that was a 5 out of 5 stars for me. It was a really great book. It ignited my love for dark academia and it made me want to read more Shakespeare, which I did because the next book was A Midsummer Night's Dream, which was so ethereal, like it was so whimsical to me. And actually I reread this book at the end of the year. Then I read From Blood and Ash, the first book in the Blood and Ash series, and I think the first book is the perfect balance between fantasy and romance. Then I read It Ends With Us. The topics she discusses in her books are not really my taste. They're not my cup of tea, but I enjoyed her storytelling abilities and her writing style. Then I read a graphic novel. I put here Laura Olympus Season 2. I enjoyed it, though it didn't have the Greek mythology aspects. And I like that Rachel tried to Persephone some kind of agency that she did not have in the myth, by the way. Then I read The Inheritance Games, the first book in the series, and I just liked the setting. Like the Hawthorne house was so good, and I liked the characters, and I liked the sibling relationship and the mystery. I read a play, like I said, de Bernarda Alba, which I needed because I was in a theater play. I read Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I don't know how to read it. It was good. I enjoyed it. Like, it's a short story collection, and I do have the second book, which I am going to read this year. Like, it is on my TBR for this year. Then I read Heartstopper, volume 1, 2, 3. I'll be sure to check the trigger warnings because it does discuss mental health. And also this book has a lot of representation in it. Next book was The Hawthorne Legacy, the second book in the Inheritance Games. And Jennifer Lynn Barnes stretched the series from a duology to a trilogy. And I think that's what kind of ruined the second book because it lacked impact and action in it, but it was good, you know, like the setting, like the characters. Then I read Nick and Charlie, which is a solitaire novella. I liked the ups and downs that are shown in their relationships, and that not every relationship is perfect, you know. Then I read 2 historical fiction books, and the fact that they're historical fiction are just, there's just an itch in my head. I read The White Queen and The Kingmaker's Daughter. Then I read Book Love. Actually, I was at a book fest then, and my mother was waiting in line to pay for a couple of books that I chose. It was like a comic book. It was really short, and I liked that. It was good. I do not remember what it was about, but it was good. Then I read Murder on the Orient Express. And my friend recommended this to me, and when she saw that I didn't read the book, she gave it to me. I did annotate it a bit, and I remember I was in the park and I read that, and I was so surprised by the ending. Then I went back to Shakespeare and I read Romeo and Juliet, the classic. Not much to say about it, like you already know Romeo and Juliet. Then I read The Sweetest Oblivion. I read this in one sitting, like literally one sitting. It was nice, but it was nothing spectacular. Then I read The Shadow Thief by Mark Levy. It was a nice book, did enjoy it, but I cannot remember what it was about. Then I read A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, the second book in Blood and Ash. The world building was horrible. I don't know how it can be even more horrible than the first book. I read The Secret History and I felt like it was a good recovery from the mess that A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire was. And it was good. The mystery, the characters. Then I read the Caraval trilogy, like all of it. Caraval Legendary Final. So good, loved it. I think Caraval was like an introduction to the world, to the characters, to, you know, the caraval, right? Then in the second book, we start to know like more and dive in deep into the story. And then final was such a good final to the trilogy. It was so good. But my poor Jax, like Stephanie didn't have to do that to him. Then I read The True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle. I have a couple of problems with that book, and one of them is the fact that she's 13 in the 18th or 17th century. Like, you don't do that. And it's Dune, the first book in the Dune series by Frank Herbert. I think it was a bit too long, a bit too many descriptions, and sometimes it got a bit boring. But like the actions, and I felt like I was attached to the characters, so I obviously enjoyed that. I read The Invisible Life of Eddie LaRue. 5 out of 5 stars, you know. P. Schwab, the best. The Crown of Gilded Bones, third book in the Blood and Ash series. Again, the world building. I just feel like now it's more romance than fantasy, and I don't like that. Then I read Fahrenheit 451, and I liked it. I think it was a nice dystopian book. It's something, dystopian books is not something that I really read this year, but I did enjoy the little break from all the fantasy and all the romance and classics. So it was a nice book, and it was really short, and I totally recommend it. Then I read In Order to Live, a North Korean girl's journey to freedom, and this is a memoir of Yeonmi Park, and I think it was so hard to read it because it's not like the writing style is anything spectacular, but it's just so sad and so emotional. So if you want to like feel sad and feel something, read this book. Then I read The Love Hypothesis. Since was my first book from Ali Hazelwood, I gave it a 5 stars because I liked it. But I know all of her books are literally the exact same thing, like big, tall, masculine man, and then a pretty little girl, and I just do not like seeing that in every single one of her books. And then I didn't read, I listened to In Paris with You. I liked it. It was like a poetry fiction kind of book, and it was the first of this kind that I read, and sincerely I like this, surprisingly, but I did. Then I read The Quest for Glory, the fourth book in the School for Good and Evil series, and I felt so good when I was reading this. It felt like truly I was escaping the world, and the ending, just someone was just not going to give the characters a nice happy ending, like in every book. I reread A Midsummer Night's Dream, which I already told you about it. Then I read What You're Gonna Do by Avery Flynn. It was like witchy romance, nothing like spooky. It had like a mystery element, like a heist, which I enjoyed. So good. If you want to see my reactions on it, I have a reading vlog. Then I read Lore by Alexandra Bracken, like inspired by Greek mythology, and I liked the aspects of it. Then I read Once Upon a Broken Heart. The ending! Stephanie will just not give the characters a happy ending. Then I read Ariadne, the last book in the year. I cannot say I truly enjoyed that book, but I did for the majority of it. But the ending just threw me off. I hope you guys enjoyed my rant of every book I read, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Goodbye.